Eduardo was a 55-year-old man who led a life that from the outside seemed perfect. A millionaire with a spacious mansion in an upscale neighborhood, he had achieved everything many people desire: successful businesses, luxury cars, and an enviable fortune. However, for him, these assets were now nothing more than cold, empty objects. After his children became adults and moved on with their own lives, Eduardo began to feel the weight of the silence at home. The end of his marriage, years ago, had been inevitable. The constant arguments and lack of complicity with his ex-wife had turned the home into an unbearable place. Now, he was completely alone. Only the dusty pictures on the fireplace testified to the days when that house was filled with laughter and love. Every morning, Eduardo would get up at the same time, drink his black coffee, read the newspaper, and look out the huge living room window. The view was beautiful, but it also caused him anguish. He thought about the life he had once had and asked himself, "Is this it? Is loneliness all I have left?" One day, as he opened the door to get the newspaper, something caught his attention. There, in front of his house, was a new security guard. A young woman with a firm posture and an attentive gaze was watching the street as she made her morning rounds. She was wearing the dark blue uniform of the security company and carried a badge with the name Valeria. Eduardo stood there for a moment, intrigued. It was rare to see a woman in a position like that. "Who is she?" he muttered to himself. Something about that simple but determined figure aroused his curiosity. Perhaps it was the contrast between his own monotonous life and her presence, which seemed to bring a different energy to that place. In the following days, Eduardo began to pay more attention to Valeria's routine. He would discreetly observe her from his window. Every day at the same time, she would walk down the street with determined steps and an attentive gaze. His presence seemed to brighten up that otherwise grey and empty space. "Good morning, Mr. Eduardo," the doorman of the building next door would say when he saw him standing on the balcony, but Eduardo didn't respond. He was too focused, lost in thought, wondering how to start a conversation with that woman who, without knowing it, had brought a breath of life into his days. Until one day, he plucked up the courage. Eduardo went down to the sidewalk and walked toward her. "Excuse me, you're new here, aren't you?" he asked in a gentle but firm voice. Valeria stopped and looked at him. Her brown eyes were kind, although they conveyed a certain initial distrust. "Oh, yes, sir. I started in this area a few days ago," she replied with a subtle smile. "It's a job. Quite different," Eduardo said, trying to prolong the conversation. "Do you like what you do?" "It's honest work, sir, and I like it. I feel useful. Besides, the routine helps me keep my mind busy," Valeria replied simply. Eduardo smiled and extended his hand. "I'm Eduardo. It's a pleasure to meet you, Valeria." She shook his hand firmly. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Eduardo." At that moment, a small ritual was born. Every morning, Eduardo and Valeria would greet each other with a brief "good morning" and exchange a few words. The silence in Eduardo's house seemed less suffocating, and he looked forward to those moments when he could talk to her. Little by little, something inside him began to change. For the first time in a long time, Eduardo felt a spark of hope. He was beginning to understand that perhaps there was still more to life. One sunny morning, Eduardo left his house with slow steps and a distracted gaze. The newspaper under his arm was just an excuse to be outside. It didn't take him long to notice her. Valeria, in her impeccable uniform, was walking along the sidewalk opposite with the same confident posture and attentive gaze. She checked the gates, the security cameras, and greeted the residents politely, although without much of a smile. Eduardo, who already knew that firm expression, stared at her for longer than usual. Valeria was, in fact, different from the other people who had worked in the neighborhood's security. There was a mix of youth and maturity in her that intrigued Eduardo. He found himself admiring the way she seemed to take her job seriously, as if every movement had a purpose. She really doesn't look like the others, Eduardo thought quietly, lost in thought. That day, Valeria noticed Eduardo's eyes fixed on her. There was no arrogance or intrusion in that look. It was just curiosity and, perhaps, a touch of loneliness. She looked away for a moment, but then smiled slightly. "Good morning, sir," Valeria said, nodding. Eduardo, a little surprised, returned the nod with a sincere smile. "Good morning, Valeria," he replied, feeling inexplicably happy about that small gesture. That simple exchange of words seemed to brighten Eduardo's day. For the first time in a long time, he realized that a good morning could mean much more than a casual greeting. It was a spark, a beginning, and Eduardo was beginning to realize that perhaps life could still have some good surprises in store for him. One morning, Eduardo, more confident, decided that he no longer wanted to limit his interactions with Valeria to quick greetings. That day, he waited for the moment when she would pass in front of his house again and made a decision. Valeria, with her firm step and attentive gaze, almost didn't notice when Eduardo approached once more, this time with a wider smile and a slightly nervous posture. "Valeria," he called out politely. She stopped and turned to him, maintaining her professionalism. "Good morning, Mr. Eduardo," she replied with a polite smile. "Please, just call me Eduardo," he insisted, his smile widening a little. "You know, I realize that you're always so dedicated to work, but it can't be easy to spend all day under this strong sun walking around here." Valeria shrugged, keeping her good humor. "It's part of the job. I even like walking, it distracts me." Eduardo nodded, as if thinking for a moment before continuing. "Yeah, but sometimes a coffee break is also good. How about a coffee on me at a place nearby, just so we can chat a little?" Valeria looked at him with some surprise. She hadn't expected the invitation, and for a moment she hesitated. It might seem inappropriate to accept an invitation from someone she barely knew. But something in Eduardo's expression, perhaps the kindness in his eyes or his careful posture, made her trust him. "I appreciate it, Eduardo. I think I can accept, just for a few minutes, okay? I have to continue my rounds later," she replied, smiling, breaking her seriousness. Eduardo's heart, for the first time in years, accelerated slightly. He nodded quickly. "Great. I promise I won't take up too much of your time." Eduardo chose a cozy cafe, located just 2 blocks away. It was a classic place, with comfortable armchairs, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and soft background music. He thought it would be a perfect spot for a relaxed conversation. When Valeria entered the cafe, she quickly took off her uniform cap and arranged her brown hair in a ponytail. Eduardo, already seated, immediately stood up, gently pulling out her chair for her. "Please, make yourself comfortable," he said, in a gesture of chivalry that surprised Valeria. "Thank you, Eduardo," she replied, sitting down with a shy smile. The gesture did not go unnoticed. It was not often that someone paid attention to such details. Eduardo sat down opposite her and smiled. "They have a special drink here, a cappuccino with cinnamon. It's really very good. If I may, I would like to recommend it." Valeria smiled, amused by his discreet enthusiasm. "You can order it for me, Eduardo. I trust your recommendation." A little while later, 2 steaming cappuccinos arrived at the table. Eduardo watched Valeria curiously as she blew the steam out of the cup. "So, Valeria, tell me a little more about yourself. How did you end up in this job?" he asked, genuinely interested. Valeria put down her cup and looked at him calmly. "I never thought I would work in a secure environment, you know. But when my father got sick, I had to leave my previous job and look for something more stable. I'm the oldest, so it was up to me to help out at home." Eduardo watched her with admiration. The way she spoke conveyed a strength he didn't find in many people. "Your father? How is he now?" he asked carefully. Valeria sighed but smiled slightly. "He has better days and worse days, but he's fighting. And while he fights, I fight too." Eduardo was silent for a moment. That phrase echoed in his mind. While he fights, I fight too. There was so much meaning and bravery in something so simple. "Valeria, you are an admirable woman," he said sincerely. "Many people would have given up in your place." She smiled, blushing. "Thank you, Eduardo. I think everyone has some struggles, right?" Eduardo nodded. For the first time in years, he felt like he was talking to someone who understood in some way the weight of life, even in such different circumstances. The conversation flowed easily after that. They talked about small details of their lives, about the city, about their routine. Eduardo told a little about his past business, and Valeria listened, interested. When the clock signaled that it was time for Valeria to return to work, Eduardo paid the bill and the two left the cafe. "Thank you for the invitation, Eduardo. It was a very nice break," she said, smiling as she put her cap back on. "Thank you, Valeria. It did me a lot of good to talk to you," he replied sincerely. As he watched Valeria return to her work, Eduardo felt something different inside him. For the first time in a long time, he didn't want the day to end. Valeria had brought some color to that grey morning, and he wanted more moments like that. The days passed, and the meeting at the cafe ended up becoming just the first of many moments shared between Eduardo and Valeria. Little by little, a different routine began to form. Whenever her work allowed, Valeria accepted Eduardo's simple but sincere invitations. A coffee after her rounds, a break for a snack, or an unpretentious walk to the nearest park. One sunny afternoon, Eduardo showed up at the gate of her house with an unexpected invitation. Valeria was finishing a conversation with a co-worker when she saw Eduardo wave, his hands in his pockets, and an almost embarrassed smile. "Valeria!" he called as she approached. "The day is so beautiful. How about a walk in the park? I haven't been there in a while, and I think a little fresh air is good for the soul." Valeria hesitated for a moment, as she always did when Eduardo invited her. But he had already become more than just an acquaintance. There was something about him, a kindness and a palpable loneliness, that made Valeria not have the courage to say no. "Okay, Eduardo, but just for a while, okay? I'm still on the clock," she replied with a smile. The park was a hidden gem in the heart of the city. Centuries-old trees formed a green tunnel over the dirt paths. The sound of the water from the central fountain mixed with the birdsong, creating an atmosphere of peace. For Eduardo, that place seemed different now. He hadn't visited the park in years, because everything reminded him of distant times. But Valeria's presence transformed any scene into something light and pleasant. As they walked side by side, Eduardo told stories from his youth. He talked about the businesses he built, the trips he took, and even times when he was more daring and fearless. Valeria, in turn, listened attentively, interrupting him every now and then to ask curious questions or laugh at some funny situation he mentioned. "So, Eduardo, you were an adventurer, huh? Who would have thought?" she joked, squinting at the sun as she watched him. Eduardo chuckled softly. "Well, Valeria, time softens us a little. Or maybe it's us who decide to hide from the world." Valeria looked at him with an air of understanding. "Sometimes the world really does seem like a difficult place, Eduardo. But you know, it's always possible to find something or someone who can bring a little color back into life." Eduardo stopped for a moment, as if those words had hit him hard. He looked at Valeria and smiled, not knowing what to say. It was as if she had read his thoughts. As they continued walking, Eduardo noticed an elderly couple sitting on a nearby bench. They were holding hands and talking quietly, laughing every now and then, completely oblivious to the movement in the park. "Just look, there's still love like that," Eduardo commented, discreetly pointing with his chin. Valeria followed his gaze and smiled softly. "There are loves like that, yes, Eduardo. Sometimes they're closer than we imagine." Her words echoed in Eduardo's mind. He looked at her for a few seconds, trying to decipher the depth of what she had said. Valeria, as always, had a simple and honest way of expressing herself, but one that left Eduardo thinking for hours. After a while, they sat on a bench under the generous shade of a tree. Valeria took off her cap and let her hair down, enjoying the cool wind. Eduardo watched her out of the corner of his eye and smiled. "You know, Valeria, I don't remember the last time I enjoyed a day like this. This park, these simple things. I think I forgot how good it is." Valeria turned to him with a broad smile. "Sometimes we just need a little break to remember, Eduardo." And at that moment, Eduardo realized something profound. It wasn't just the park, the sun, or the silence broken by the sound of birds. It was Valeria. Her presence, so simple and genuine, was transforming his days, taking him out of the shadow of loneliness in which he had placed himself. The afternoon passed too quickly, and when the sun began to set, dyeing the sky orange, Valeria stood up and adjusted her uniform. "I have to go now, Eduardo. My shift isn't over yet," she said, with a hint of regret in her voice. Eduardo smiled, standing up too. Of course. Thank you for coming, Valeria. This day was special for me." She smiled back sincerely. "For me too, Eduardo." As she walked away, with firm steps and that attentive posture as always, Eduardo felt a different warmth in his chest. It wasn't just gratitude, it was something else, something he couldn't name, but that made his days seem less empty and his house less silent. That day, Eduardo realized that maybe, just maybe, there was still time to find the brightness of life again, and he knew Valeria had something to do with it. After weeks of walks in the park and conversations that had become longer and deeper, Eduardo felt ready to take a new step. Valeria had become more than just an acquaintance or occasional companion. Her presence was a balm for lonely days, and Eduardo wanted to repay that in some way by showing how special he considered her. That morning, as Valeria was making her usual rounds on the street, Eduardo gathered up his courage and approached her. His heart was beating faster, as if he were a young man about to extend his first invitation to someone he liked. "Good morning, Valeria," he said, with a smile that was wider than usual. "Good morning, Eduardo," she replied, stopping and adjusting her cap. "You seem different today. Did something good happen?" Eduardo laughed, a little awkwardly. "Maybe. Or rather, I'm trying to make something good happen. I thought I'd invite you to dinner at my house tonight. Nothing much, just something simple. I'll prepare it myself." Valeria raised her eyebrows in surprise. "You cooking?" she asked, amused. "Hey, I have some hidden talents, you know," Eduardo replied, laughing too. "I promise you won't leave there hungry. What do you think?" Valeria hesitated for a second, looking at Eduardo's face. There was sincerity in his eyes, something pure and honest that made her relax. "Okay, Eduardo, I accept the invitation. But don't complicate things, okay? Remember that I'm not a big fan of formalities." "Perfect. So today at 8, okay?" he said, visibly happy. Edward spent the rest of the day completely out of his routine. He wanted this dinner to be memorable, not for luxury or extravagance, but for the attention to detail. He had the dining room cleaned, opened the windows to air out the house, and chose soft music to play in the background. She took a linen tablecloth that had been saved years ago, set the table with fine china that was only used on special occasions, and placed an arrangement of fresh flowers in the center. In the kitchen, even without being an experienced chef, Eduardo made an effort. He chose to prepare a simple but tasty dish, fresh pasta with homemade tomato sauce and basil. As he stirred the pot, he smiled to himself, remembering Valeria's words, "Nothing to complicate." When the clock struck 7:50 p.m., Edward changed. She opted for a light blue shirt, comfy pants, and a pair of understated shoes. Before going downstairs, he stopped in front of the mirror and laughed at himself. "Who would have thought that one day I would be like this, looking forward to dinner?" he thought. At 8 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Edward took a deep breath, took one last look at the candlelit room, and opened the door. There was Valeria, standing in the doorway, smiling with some shyness. She had changed from her work uniform to dark jeans and a simple but elegant blouse. Her hair was loose, falling gently over her shoulders. "Wow," Edward muttered, surprised. "You look beautiful, Valeria." She smiled, a little embarrassed. "Thank you, Eduardo. And from what I see, you really took this dinner seriously." Edward laughed, giving her space to enter. "I promised it would be special." Valeria entered and looked around. The house, previously always silent and cold, was now cozy, lit by soft lights and candles on the table. The instrumental music created an engaging atmosphere. "Edward, this whole thing is wonderful," she said, her tone genuinely surprised. "I just wanted you to feel welcome," he replied, leading her to the table. "I hope you like the food too." The two sat down, and Edward served dinner, his hands shaking a little with nervousness. When Valeria tasted the first fork, she smiled and looked at him. "It's delicious, Eduardo. Did you really cook this yourself?" "Almost alone," he joked. "YouTube helped a little." Valeria laughed loudly, and that sound filled Eduardo's heart. The house felt alive again. While they ate dinner, the conversation flowed naturally, as it always did between the two. Eduardo told funny stories from his youth, while Valeria talked about her simple life, her struggles and dreams. She talked about how she had started working as a security guard and how the discipline of her work helped her get through difficult times. "I didn't have many opportunities, you know," Valeria said, absent-mindedly fiddling with her fork, "but I learned to value every little good thing that life gives me." Eduardo nodded excitedly. "You taught me that too, Valeria." She looked into his eyes, surprised. "I? Like this? Since we met, you've brought something back to me that I thought I'd lost. The simplicity, the hope, even the joy of preparing dinner. Thank you for that." Valeria smiled, her eyes shining softly. "Eduardo, life still has a lot to offer, even when we think the best is over. Sometimes it's just a matter of looking around us." The conversation between Eduardo and Valeria continued to be fluid and pleasant. Between laughter and stories, the environment became increasingly intimate, as if those previously cold walls were absorbing the energy of a genuine connection. Eduardo watched Valeria carefully, enchanted by the simplicity and lightness she brought with her. It was something he hadn't felt in a long time. As he poured both of them more wine, Edward took a deep breath. Something inside him insisted that he say what he had been keeping in his heart for the last few days. The dinner, the perfect atmosphere, and Valeria's presence encouraged him to take this step. "Valeria," he called softly, his voice a little lower, almost hesitant. She stopped playing with the napkin and looked at him, noticing his more serious tone. "Yes, Eduardo." He placed the wine glass on the table and looked deeply into her eyes. "I wanted to share something with you, something that perhaps I myself took a while to understand." Valeria frowned, intrigued, but kept her gaze fixed on his. Eduardo seemed vulnerable at that moment, as if he were revealing a hidden part of himself. "Ever since we started talking," Ever since that day we exchanged our first good morning on the street, I feel like something has changed inside me. Valeria, you have brought light into my life. A life that, until recently, seemed empty and without purpose. I spent years living with loneliness, believing that there was no longer room for feeling something new. Valeria's eyes softened. She said nothing, letting Eduardo continue. But you, with your simplicity, your honest way of seeing the world, awakened something that I didn't even know still existed. You showed me that I can smile again, that I can want to be there for someone. Valeria, what I'm trying to say is that I feel something special for you. A silence filled the room. The soft music in the background seemed to have faded, giving way only to Eduardo's accelerated heartbeat. He looked at Valeria, anxious for an answer, whatever it might be. Valeria lowered her eyes for a moment, as if searching for the right words, and then smiled softly. Eduardo, she began, looking up again. I didn't expect to hear this today, but I have to be honest. Ever since we met, I realized that you're different. At first, I only thought of you as the rich man of the mansion, but soon I saw the man behind that facade. A generous, caring man who carries a loneliness that I understand very well. Eduardo looked at her with teary eyes, listening to every word. You brought something to me too, Eduardo. You made me feel that life can be more than just working and surviving. That maybe I can allow myself moments of joy, of connection. And you are part of that, she continued in a loving tone. Eduardo smiled, relieved and moved. He gently held Valeria's hand, feeling it warm and firm. I don't want to rush anything, Eduardo said sincerely. I just wanted you to know how I feel. And that, whatever the next step may be, I'm here, ready to experience it by your side. Valeria nodded, squeezing his hand gently. I'm here too, Eduardo. We'll figure it out together, in our own time. At that moment, it seemed like time had stopped. The candles continued to burn softly, the music filled the room again, and Eduardo felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: peace and hope. The house, once silent and lifeless, now seemed like a refuge. Valeria's presence had transformed not only the environment, but also Eduardo's heart. They continued talking until late. When Valeria finally got up to leave, Eduardo walked her to the door. Before leaving, she turned to him and smiled. It was a very special evening, Eduardo. Thank you. Thank you, Valeria, he replied, looking at her tenderly. When the door closed, Eduardo stood in the hall for a moment, looking at the table lit by the candles that were still burning. For the first time in many years, he felt that his home was no longer an empty place. And deep in his heart, something was beginning to be reborn, the hope that perhaps love could find a way back into his life. The days that followed dinner were marked by an indescribable lightness. Eduardo felt as if he had gone back in time, rediscovering the small joys of life. Valeria continued with her work routine, but now there was a different sparkle in their eyes whenever they met. The usual good mornings had turned into knowing smiles, small touches of hands and conversations that seemed to never end. One morning, while they were walking through the park they had adopted as a refuge, Eduardo decided to bring up the subject that had been hanging in the air between them since dinner. They stopped near a lake where ducks were swimming peacefully. The wind blew lightly, causing a few leaves to fall gently around them. Eduardo observed Valeria, who seemed absorbed in watching the movement of the water. Valeria, he called, in a calm and serene voice. She turned to him with the same welcoming smile as always. Eduardo took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. I've been thinking a lot about us, about what we said at dinner that night. He paused briefly. Since then, I feel like life has become more alive, you know? You brought something I didn't even know I needed. Valeria smiled, understanding where he was going with it. She remained silent, allowing him to continue. I don't want to force anything, but I wanted to know if you would be willing to take this step with me. A bigger step. Valeria, I would like us to try. That we, together, allow ourselves to experience this, a relationship, in our own time, without rushing. Valeria took a deep breath and looked at him. Her brown eyes shone with a mixture of emotion and serenity. Eduardo, she began, taking a small step closer to him. When we first met, I didn't imagine that you would have such an impact on my life. I considered myself a closed person, someone who could no longer think about feelings like that. But you changed that. The way you look at the world, the way you treat me with respect, care, made me realize that I can, indeed, open my heart. Eduardo watched her in silence, his heart racing. Yes, Eduardo, Valeria continued, smiling sweetly. I accept. I accept being with you, giving us both a chance. I know it won't be perfect, that we both carry scars, but I want to try. Because you make me feel alive. Eduardo smiled, his eyes brimming with emotion. Unable to contain the impulse, he gently held Valeria's hands and looked at her with the sincerity of a man who had found hope again. You don't know how much this means to me, he whispered. Valeria squeezed his hands in response. To me too, Eduardo. They stood there side by side with the sun softly illuminating their faces. The silence that enveloped them was no longer that of loneliness, but that of two hearts that had found each other at the right time. For the first time in many years, Eduardo felt that he had a true companion by his side, someone who saw beyond his fortune and his scars. In that park, as the leaves continued to fall and the wind danced around them, Eduardo and Valeria began a new chapter in their lives, a chapter of new beginnings, complicity, and above all, love. It was a cold autumn morning, and Valeria was alone in her house, with the soft aroma of coffee filling the air. The day was starting off peacefully, but inside her, a whirlwind of thoughts was forming. During the last few weeks, she had been feeling something different, a sensation that she could not clearly name. The inexplicable fatigue, the morning nausea, and even the small moments of excessive emotion. All of this made her think that something was happening. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and, with a sigh, picked up the pregnancy test she had bought the night before. She had hesitated a bit before deciding to take it, but at that moment, curiosity and the need to know the truth drove her. The small package, with simple instructions, seemed almost symbolic, given the gravity of what she was about to discover. Valeria sat on the bathroom floor, the test still in her hand, and looked at the clock. Time seemed to move slowly, as if the universe itself was waiting for the moment to reveal what she wanted, but feared to know. She closed her eyes for a moment, saying a silent prayer that everything would be okay. Then she looked at the test. 2 little lines. 2. Time suddenly seemed to stretch, and her heart jumped inside her chest. She was pregnant. At first, there was no immediate reaction. Valeria just sat there, sitting on the bathroom floor, staring at the small piece of plastic that confirmed what somehow she already intuited. The warmth of surprise and happiness mixed with a slight fear of the unknown. I'm pregnant, she repeated to herself, as if trying to make sense of it. The thought echoed in her mind. It was true. A new life was inside her. She stood up slowly, her thoughts returning to her relationship with Eduardo. They had met a few months ago, and since then, everything between them seemed light and deep at the same time. He treated her with such patience and affection, and she knew that their love had grown stronger every day. Now, with this news, Valeria felt a mixture of joy and apprehension. How would he react? How would she react from now on? Wasting no time, she prepared herself. She put on comfortable clothes, took a sip of water and sat for a moment in the living room. The house was quiet, the soft light coming through the window like a welcoming embrace, waiting to see what would come next. She knew she had to tell Eduardo. He was at work at the time, but he didn't want to wait any longer. The decision had been made. With her heart racing, Valeria picked up her cell phone and, on impulse, sent a short message. "We need to talk, something important. Meet me at home as soon as you can, please." Soon the phone rang, and it was Eduardo. "Hi, my dear. What happened? Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft but full of concern. Valeria smiled at the familiarity of his voice and felt comfort in her heart. "I'm fine, Eduardo, but I have something important to tell you, something that will change everything between us." She realized she was speaking without thinking much, the words coming out like a stream. Anxiety was taking over her, but she no longer wanted to hide what she felt. "I'm coming over. I'll meet you right away." "Don't worry, love," he replied, with a calmness that only he had. Valeria waited anxiously, sitting on the couch, her mind racing. She lightly touched her belly, as if she wanted to share with the life that was coming inside her, the happiness and nervousness that mixed together. When the doorbell rang, she almost jumped from her seat. Eduardo walked in, a smile on his face. "Hi, my darling. What do you have to tell me?" He approached her and hugged her, but she gently stopped him, her hands still touching her belly. I'm pregnant, Eduardo," she said, looking him in the eyes, now with a sincere smile. "I took the test this morning and it came back positive." Eduardo looked at her for a few seconds as if the words hadn't sunk in right away. Then a smile spread across his face, and he held her by the shoulders, looking deeply into her. "Pregnant? Really?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief, but also of joy. "Yes, really," Valeria replied, laughing nervously, but also feeling a wave of happiness invade her heart. "I don't know what to say, Eduardo. It's so real. I'm so happy, but at the same time, so scared." He pulled her closer, kissing her forehead tenderly. "I don't know how I'm going to be as a father, Valeria, but I know one thing. I'll be with you every step of the way. We're going to do this together, hand in hand." The two of them stood there in silence for a moment, their words mixing with their feelings of excitement and surprise. The future seemed uncertain, but in that room, with the sun gently streaming through the windows, everything seemed clearer. "So, are we really doing this?" Valeria asked, looking at him with a shy but certain smile. "Yes, we're doing this. We're going to be parents, Valeria, and together we're going to be the best family we can be." Valeria smiled, and from that moment on, life seemed more vibrant, more full of possibilities. They were about to start a new chapter, a chapter that no one could have predicted, but that, with love, they would write together. Chapter: Eduardo's Proposal. The minutes following Valeria's revelation passed like a whirlwind of emotions. The room, which had previously seemed like a silent space, was now filled with a new warmth, an energy that they could both feel. Eduardo, still holding Valeria's hands, watched her with a mixture of surprise, joy, and even a slight apprehension. I don't know what to say, Valeria," Eduardo began, his voice shaking with emotion. "You've just changed everything. I knew something special was happening between us, but I never imagined that it would be this wonderful." Valeria looked at him, her eyes shining with emotion. She knew that although the news was surprising, there was no one she would rather share this moment with than him. She felt that together they could face anything. "I didn't expect it either, Eduardo," Valeria replied with a soft smile, "but at the same time, it's such a joy. I know we're not prepared for everything that comes, but I want to do this with you. I want to face this journey by your side." Eduardo hugged her, squeezing her gently. as if he never wanted to let her go. I don't have the words to express what I'm feeling right now. I didn't expect that a simple yes to this relationship would lead me to something so great. But I'm happy, Valeria. I'm happier than I've been in a long time. For a moment, the two of them were silent, absorbing the depth of what they had just discovered. The soft sound of the wind hitting the windows seemed to accompany the rhythm of their hearts, which were now beating together as if they were synchronized. Eduardo then looked at Valeria with a serious expression, but also with a sparkle of affection in his eyes. "I have an idea," he said, his voice a little firmer now. "Valeria, we still have a lot to learn about this new path we're about to take, but I'm sure of one thing. I want you to be by my side. I want this baby to grow up in a home full of love and security. I want you to come live with me. I want us to be a family, for real." Valeria looked at him, surprised by the proposal, but feeling at the same time a sense of relief. She didn't know what to say, because the idea of living together, especially at such a young stage in their lives, was a big deal. But when she looked into Eduardo's eyes, she saw the sincerity and affection he had for her, and knew that the proposal came from a pure place. "Are you serious?" Valeria asked, her voice soft, as if she was trying to process the depth of what he had just said. Eduardo nodded, holding her gaze. "Of course I am. I want us to build something strong, a home. It won't be easy, I know. But I believe that, together, we can make it work. No matter what happens, I want to be with you and support you in everything." Valeria felt a knot inside her unravel. Eduardo's proposal touched her deeply. She never imagined that, at a time like that, he would invite her to take such an important step. At the same time, the fear of the unknown was still there, but the certainty that she would not be alone on this path comforted her. I don't know what to say, Eduardo," she began with a slight nervous laugh. "It's so big what you're proposing, and I don't have all the answers either. But the idea of being by your side, of building our life together, seems like the best thing I could do." Eduardo smiled and took a step closer to her. "I understand how scary this may seem, Valeria, but you don't need to have all the answers right now. Let's take it step by step, calmly. I'm here for you, for us." Valeria smiled, and with her eyes full of emotion, hugged Eduardo again. "I accept, Eduardo. Let's try. Yes. Let's live this love and this new life together." The two remained there, hugging, while the world around them seemed to quiet down for a moment. Valeria's decision to accept Eduardo's proposal was not just about moving to a new house. It was about a new beginning, about the confidence in building something solid and lasting, a family that was born not only in Valeria's womb, but also in both of their hearts. "I promise I'll be by your side always," Eduardo said, his voice firm, as if he were sealing a silent pact between them. "And I'll be with you, Eduardo, every step of this journey." There, in that moment, they knew they were ready to face the future, no matter what it held. Together they would be stronger, more united, and, above all, more prepared to live the life that was now beginning to take shape before them. The birth of Sofia, Eduardo and Valeria's daughter, changed their lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. When Valeria held Sofia's tiny body in her arms for the first time, everything around her seemed to disappear. The world, which had seemed so big and challenging for so long, was now there, in a new form, being born together with the little being they had created together. Eduardo was next to Valeria in the delivery room, his eyes filled with tears and a wide smile on his face. He held her hand, which was tight but full of strength. Sofia's cries echoed through the room, and for Eduardo, that sound was the most beautiful music he had ever heard. "She's perfect," Valeria whispered, her eyes fixed on her daughter as tears streamed down her face. Eduardo looked at her with a mixture of love and gratitude. "Yes, she is. And look how strong you are, Valeria. I admire you more every day. The days following Sophia's birth were a whirlwind of new experiences, laughter, and even challenges. They quickly learned that being parents was not an easy task. The sleepless nights, the unexpected cries, and the seemingly endless diapers brought the couple even closer together. Each small victory, Sophia's first smile, her first step, was celebrated with immense joy. Valeria, who had previously felt a little lost when imagining the future, now found herself fully involved in building her family. Eduardo, always dedicated, took care of Sophia with a patience and affection that surprised Valeria every day. He became more present, more loving, and this made her feel that, with him by her side, she would never have to face the world alone. As the months passed, their house was filled with laughter and renewed energy. They were building not just a house, but a home. Sophia, with her contagious smile and her small gestures, was the link that united their hearts even more. Eduardo and Valeria were more in love than ever, and now, with Sophia, their love for each other multiplied. "You are the best mother our daughter could have," Eduardo said one night, as Valeria watched him, amazed at how he supported her. "I only see love in your eyes when you look at her. You are doing this in such an incredible way." Valeria smiled, feeling deeply touched. "I couldn't do this without you, Eduardo. We are a team, and that is the most important thing. We are building something beautiful together." Deep down, Valeria knew that Eduardo not only helped her with her daughter, but was also there for her, every step of the way, every moment of doubt. They had their ups and downs, like any couple, but the truth is that they were closer than ever. Over time, a routine settled in. Mornings began early, with the sound of the alarm clock echoing through the house, and Sophia's laughter filling the corners of the living room as she played. Valeria prepared breakfast, and Eduardo helped with the little one, tying her shoes or tidying up the toys scattered around the house. "I think she's ready to learn to walk," Eduardo commented one morning, watching Sophia try to take her first steps. Valeria smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "I know. It's a magical moment. She's growing up so fast." Meanwhile, their conversations became deeper, more mature. They talked about the future, about their plans for Sophia's education, about how they would do their best to give her the best. But at the same time, they knew that the most important thing was not what they could give in terms of material things, but what they could offer as parents: love, security, and unconditional support. Night after night, when Sophia was already asleep in her crib, Eduardo and Valeria would sit on the sofa in the living room, sharing dreams and memories. They talked about how they felt at that first dinner together, when the idea of a future seemed so distant, but now it was there, more concrete than ever. "I never imagined our life would be like this. So full of joy and love," Valeria said, leaning her head on Eduardo's shoulder. "Everything we've been through, everything we've experienced, has brought us here." Eduardo squeezed her hand. "Me neither. But I know that with you by my side, we can get through anything. Our family is the greatest gift we could ever have." In Eduardo and Valeria's eyes, happiness was not measured by what they had, but by what they had built together. The love they shared was the solid foundation on which they were building their family. And so, day after day, Sophia grew up in a home where love was the strength that held everyone together. They were raising not just a daughter, but a story, a legacy of love and unity that would last for generations. "We are a family," Valeria whispered, smiling at Eduardo as he hugged her. "And that's all I've ever wanted." "And so am I, Valeria. And so am I." Eduardo and Valeria's life had taken unexpected turns, but at the same time filled them with satisfaction and complicity. After Sophia was born, the couple felt closer than ever, and the difficulties that had previously seemed gigantic were now just obstacles to be overcome together. It was as if, little by little, life was shaping a new future for them, a future that was not limited to raising Sophia, but that also invited them to expand their horizons and explore new possibilities. It was on a quiet afternoon, while Sophia was at school and the house seemed quieter than usual, that Eduardo and Valeria began to talk about what awaited them in the future. They had always loved challenges, but the dream of having their own business had remained in the drawer for a long time, kept among other ideas, some riskier, others more conservative. What if we started something together? Our own business, something that truly represented us? Valeria asked, with a look of concern in her eyes. She already knew Eduardo's drive for big projects, and she knew that he was also feeling a growing desire to do something new, different. Eduardo looked at her thoughtfully, as if he were considering the possibilities, and soon a smile of excitement took over his face. I think it would be amazing, something that reflected who we are now, who we have become, something that involved our love, our story. Valeria smiled back, with the same sparkle in her eyes. I was thinking of something related to well-being and quality of life. We know how much our routine changed after Sophia was born. We started to value the little moments more, to connect with what really matters. You're right, Eduardo said, imagining the possibilities. We can create a space that helps other families connect, that offers products or services that promote work-life balance, something that people can actually use in their daily lives. The conversation flowed naturally, and soon they began to detail ideas. Valeria had the practical experience she had acquired over the years, while Eduardo brought his business acumen and strategic skills. Together, they formed a perfect partnership. After several weeks of research, planning, and discussions about the business model, the couple decided to open a small home goods store, focused on items that would provide greater well-being and comfort to families. The store would not be just a place to buy objects, but rather a well-being center. They planned to offer everything from furniture and home accessories to consulting services for organizing and optimizing family space. The idea was simple, but with a difference. Each product or service should be designed to make life easier for modern families, those who, like them, had learned to value simplicity and balance. Eduardo and Valeria dedicated themselves to the new venture with zeal. They spent hours together, choosing each item, deciding on the store's decor, and thinking of ways to welcome customers. The store was designed with a welcoming atmosphere, with environments that conveyed calm, harmony, and well-being. Every detail was thought out to reflect their values of family, love, and connection. On their first day of business, they were nervous, but also excited. The store was beautiful and ready to welcome customers. Valeria was in charge of customer service, always with her welcoming demeanor, while Eduardo oversaw the administrative side, making sure everything was in order. Even though the first few days had been quieter, there was a palpable sense that they were on the right track. I always dreamed of having something of our own, and now it's happening, Valeria, said Eduardo, as she organized a display of scented candles on one of the shelves. Valeria looked at him, smiling. Me too, Edward. And more than that, we are creating something together, something that has a little piece of each of us. This is just the beginning. Over time, the store gained more and more customers. Families looking for products that would help make life simpler and more comfortable began to realize the difference that Eduardo and Valeria offered. Word of mouth began to spread the word that the store was a special place where people could not only shop, but also feel at home. Business began to grow, and with it, the pride of seeing the couple's effort and dedication come to fruition. They were creating something that not only brought prosperity, but also gave them a deep sense of fulfillment. More than just a business, they were building a legacy, something that reflected their values and the new life they had created as a family. "We did it, Valeria. This is just the beginning. What started as an idea turned into something real, something that can help many people. And it's just the beginning," said Eduardo, with a sparkle in his eyes, observing the movement in the store. Valeria, with the serene smile of someone who knows she is on the right path, replied, "Yes, Eduardo. We are building our future with lots of love and dedication." And so, with hearts full of gratitude and the certainty that their partnership was unbreakable, Eduardo and Valeria moved on. The store was just the first chapter of a bigger story they were writing together, a chapter where the strength of the partnership and the desire to build something lasting guided every step taken. The months that followed the store's opening were marked by a constant pace of work and achievements for Eduardo and Valeria. The store prospered, the family became closer and closer, and the love they shared seemed to grow every day. However, as always happens in life, the calm they had found was soon challenged by an unexpected wind from the past. It was a Friday afternoon when Valeria arrived home after a long day at the store. She walked through the door, took off her shoes, and went straight to the living room, where Eduardo was organizing some papers. As she walked past the coffee table, something caught her eye: an envelope decorated with fresh flowers. The sweet smell of flowers was still in the air. It was something she recognized, the same delicate touch that Miguel, her ex-boyfriend, used to give to small things. With a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, Valeria took the envelope and slowly opened it. Inside was a note, in an elegant and familiar handwriting, that said, "Dear Valeria, I hope you are well. I can't stop thinking about the good times we shared. I know that time has passed, and you have gone your way, but I want you to know that I will always be rooting for your happiness. If you ever want to talk, I am here." Valeria felt butterflies in her stomach. The words, sweet and filled with a disguised longing, reminded her of a time when she and Miguel were inseparable. But now the past seemed distant, almost like another life. She knew that what she and Edward had was real, strong, and deep. Even so, Miguel's touch, even after so long, still caused a whirlwind of emotions. Next to the note, there was a small box of dried flowers, a kind of delicate gift that Miguel had always known how to choose perfectly. Valeria felt a slight sadness when she saw the gesture, but, at the same time, a strange feeling of discomfort. Why now? Why, after so long, did he appear again? Valeria stood there for a moment, holding the flowers in her hands, trying to process her feelings. Before he had time to think more about it, his cell phone vibrated. It was a message. "Hi, Valeria, how are you? I miss you." The name that appeared on the screen was not Eduardo's, but Miguel's. She looked at the message with her heart racing, not knowing exactly how to react. The last time she had spoken to Miguel was several years ago, when their relationship had ended amicably but with some pain. The relationship didn't work out, and Valeria moved on with her life. She had never heard from him again until that moment. She felt the weight of the situation, torn between the desire to be transparent with Eduardo and the need to deal with that old affection that, even though it had been left behind, still seemed to persist in some way. "Dear Eduardo," she thought, "I have to be honest with him. I can't let this grow in a way that affects what we have now." Valeria took a deep breath, and after hesitating for a few seconds, began to write a reply to Miguel. But before sending it, she decided that she needed to talk to Eduardo about it. She knew that transparency was essential to maintain trust in their relationship. Later, while Eduardo was preparing dinner, Valeria approached him and, in a calm voice, but with a touch of insecurity, said, "Eduardo, something happened today. Something I didn't expect. I received flowers and a message from Miguel, my ex-boyfriend." She paused, watching his reaction. Eduardo stopped what he was doing and looked at Valeria, his eyes curious but with a calm expression. He knew that Valeria had always been honest with him, and this didn't seem like something she had sought. "Miguel? What do you mean?" She explained the situation in every detail, without hiding anything. When she finished speaking, Eduardo looked at her for a moment in silence. Valeria felt butterflies in her stomach, wondering what he would think. "I trust you, Valeria," he finally said, his voice firm but soft. "If this is in the past, it's in the past. I just need to know that you're being honest with me." She smiled, relieved by his reaction. "I am, Eduardo. I am." "Then that doesn't worry me. What matters is now. What matters is what we have." He placed his hand over hers and looked into her eyes. "And you're here with me. That's what matters." Valeria felt a wave of gratitude and love for him. Even with Miguel's unexpected message, Eduardo showed her how much what they had was stronger than any shadow of the past. She smiled, relieved, and with renewed confidence, she put Miguel's note and box of flowers in a drawer where they belonged, in the past. The evening went on peacefully, and as they shared dinner, Valeria felt, once again, that she had made the right decision in choosing Eduardo. Their future was more solid than ever. The love they shared needed no comparisons with the past. It was unique and true. And that was all that really mattered. After the frank conversation with Eduardo, Valeria felt the weight of the past begin to disappear. The flowers and Miguel's message no longer seemed to have the same impact. She had chosen to be honest with Eduardo, and the trust between them was stronger than ever. However, fate had other plans, and Miguel was not willing to accept the distance that time and Valeria's choices had imposed. It was an ordinary afternoon when Valeria was in her living room, organizing some papers related to the store. The soft sound of music filled the room, and she tried to keep her mind busy, distracted from the feeling of an ordinary day, until her cell phone vibrated, interrupting her peace. She looked at the screen and, with a sigh, saw Miguel's name. It was the first time he had contacted her after the flowers and the message. Her heart jumped, but she forced herself to remain calm. It was just a message, wasn't it? She hesitated for a moment, and then decided to open it. "Hi, Valeria. I can't stop thinking about you. I know things didn't end the way we hoped, but I really believe we can still make it work. I'd like to talk, maybe grab a coffee. If you feel like there's room for that, I'd love to hear from you again." Valeria was silent for a few seconds, observing the words. The message seemed innocent at first glance, but she knew there was more behind it. Miguel was trying to get back together. He was trying to reverse time, recreate what they had once had. The feeling of discomfort she had felt when she received the flowers and the note returned, now becoming a restlessness that took over her thoughts. She thought about Eduardo, about everything they had built together, and the feeling that this moment seemed to be coming to test the strength of their relationship. With her mind agitated, Valeria got up from the table and walked to the window. She looked outside at the city that was pulsing outside and felt the gentle wind on her face. She knew she needed to be honest with herself. What did she really want? What should she do? In the background, she heard the sounds of the kitchen, where Eduardo was preparing something for dinner. His presence calmed her. What she had with Eduardo was not just love, but a shared life, a partnership that had grown and matured. She looked at her phone screen again, pondering Miguel's message. What was he trying to say? That he wanted to get back together? That there was still something between them? Valeria knew that if they gave in to this attempt to get back together, it could be the beginning of a series of questions, confusions, and uncertainties. Her life with Eduardo seemed safe and solid, but Miguel's return stirred her emotions in ways she couldn't ignore. She had a commitment to Eduardo, and the doubt that arose in her heart only showed how much she needed to reflect before making any decision. With a deep sigh, Valeria sat back down at the table, picked up her phone, and began typing the reply. "Hello, Miguel. I thought a lot about what you wrote. I am grateful for the time we spent together, but things have changed. I have moved on, and I am very happy with my life now. I think it is best for both of us to go our separate ways. I hope you understand." Valeria hesitated for a moment before pressing the send button. It was a difficult decision, but she knew it was the right one. She had a life with Eduardo, a story that was just beginning to be written, and she didn't want to look back. The moment she clicked send, the weight on her chest lifted. She knew she had been honest with Miguel and, more importantly, honest with herself. The past no longer had power over the present. With the reply sent, Valeria went to the kitchen. Eduardo looked at her with a loving smile, and as he approached her, he took her hand. "Is everything okay?" he asked, as if he knew something was on her mind. She looked into his eyes, and with a calm smile answered, "Yes, everything is okay. I just needed to make a decision." Eduardo hugged her tightly, as if to say with that gesture that no matter what the future brought, the important thing was that they were together, on the same path. She snuggled into his arms, and in that moment, she knew that no matter how much the past tried to return, their future was what really mattered. That night, as they ate dinner together, Valeria felt at peace. The love she felt for Eduardo was more than enough to keep her moving forward, without looking back. The weight of the decision was still present on Valeria's shoulders, like a lingering shadow, but she knew she needed to face it once and for all. Miguel, her past, wouldn't leave her alone until he knew where she really was, emotionally. The messages, the flowers, the reminders of a time that was behind us, all of it was testing her limits. Valeria knew she needed to be clear, not only to him, but mainly to herself. One cold autumn afternoon, Valeria woke up with a firm decision. She called Miguel, asking to meet. He, as she expected, quickly accepted. It was strange how feelings could be so contradictory. At the same time that Valeria felt that she needed to put an end to it, her heart still felt a nostalgic warmth for the memories, although now they were just distant echoes of a life she had already lived. Overcome. The meeting was scheduled for a small, cozy cafe, a place Valeria used to frequent with Eduardo. She entered the place with her heart racing, her eyes focused on the table where Miguel was waiting, an easy smile on her face, as if there was no misunderstanding between them. When Miguel saw her, he immediately stood up and greeted her with a hug. Valeria, despite the strange feeling, returned the gesture with forced lightness. "Valeria, you look beautiful as always. I was waiting for this moment," said Miguel, in a soft, almost melancholy voice. She smiled, but her mind was far away. They sat down, and before he started talking more, Valeria already knew it was time to put her cards on the table. "Michael, I think we need to be clear with each other. What happened between us is in the past, and I can't keep giving mixed signals. I'm in a very different place now. My present and my future are with Eduardo. He is the one I chose, and I need you to understand that." Miguel looked at her, and for a moment Valeria saw silent pain in his eyes. But he didn't say anything right away. He just smiled sadly and shook his head. "I knew this could happen. But still, Valeria, I never forgot you. You were the person who made me believe that love could be simple, but I know you don't feel the same anymore." Valeria took a deep breath, feeling the weight of those words, but she was determined. "I can't go back, Miguel. I wish you the best, but I'm moving on. Eduardo gives me something that you never gave me: stability, trust, and above all, a love that is not lost in time. With him, I found a home, and it's not something I want to give up." Miguel was silent for a moment. Valeria's look, firm and determined, made him finally understand what was at stake. He couldn't force anything. Although the desire to return was strong, he knew he couldn't compete with what she had now. It was the end. An end he feared, but inevitably came. "I understand, Valeria. It's just, I couldn't help but try, you know? But I see that you made the right choice for you. I just hope you're happy." Valeria looked at him, her eyes a little teary. It wasn't a happiness she wanted. It was just the closing of a chapter that had already been written, and she knew that, even if it was difficult, this was the right path. "I will be, Miguel. I've finally found happiness." The conversation went on for a few more minutes, but Valeria felt that what needed to be said had already been said. She got up from the table, feeling a relief she didn't know she needed. Miguel was still watching her, but Valeria's decision had already been made. As she left the cafe, Valeria took a deep breath, the cold air outside helping her feel lighter. The encounter with Miguel, although emotional, was a lesson in clarity and courage. Now she knew she was ready to move on with Eduardo, without any more doubts, without any more questions. That night, when Valeria returned home, she found Eduardo in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. He looked up when he saw her, and a genuine smile formed on his face. "So? How was it?" he asked, with a slight tension in his voice, as if he already knew that something important had happened. Valeria approached him and hugged him tightly, as if she wanted him to know that she was there, whole, with him. There was no more room for the past. What she had with Eduardo was real, and she was ready to live that love fully. "It was closure, Eduardo, a true closure, and now I just want to be here with you. This is my place, where I should have always been." Eduardo looked at her, his eyes shining with a mixture of relief and happiness. He kissed her softly on the forehead and, with a smile, said, "I love you, Valeria, and I know that, together, we can face anything." She smiled, her heart beating fast, but now full of certainty. She knew that their future would be built on trust, love, and partnership. Nothing else mattered. The past was behind them, and they were ready for what was to come. Time passed gently, like the changing seasons, and Eduardo and Valeria's life continued at a serene pace, but full of deep meaning. Together, they had built more than a family. They had formed a home, a solid and unbreakable foundation of love and companionship. Each day spent with Valeria and their daughter, now a happy and lively girl, seemed like a silent celebration of what true love can do. Eduardo's home, which had previously seemed like a great void of luxury and solitude, was now filled with laughter, stories, and the sound of life really happening. Valeria took care of the house and their daughter with immense love, while Eduardo dedicated himself to work, but always with the certainty that the most important thing was at home, waiting for him. One afternoon they were in the garden, a simple scene but full of meaning. Their daughter, with her hair tousled by the wind, ran around the garden, playing with the ball that Eduardo had just given her. Valeria and Eduardo watched the scene with their hearts full of joy. They were together, building a future, making memories. Valeria approached Eduardo, who was sitting in the rocking chair, and knelt beside him, her eyes shining with love. "I never imagined life could be like this. I thought what I wanted was something that was just mine, but I found everything I needed when I found you," she said, her voice soft but full of conviction. Eduardo smiled and pulled her closer, hugging her tightly. "I also never imagined I would find someone like you, Valeria. You taught me that true love has no limits, that it can overcome anything, any difficulty, any fear." Valeria looked at him, feeling the warmth of his embrace, and for a moment she was sure that she had found her place in the world. It was no longer the past, nor the doubts, nor the shadows that the future had brought with it. Now everything was clear. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. And what matters most, Valeria said with a soft smile, is that we're here, together. Our daughter has a home, we have each other, and the love we've built is beyond anything I could have imagined. Yes, Eduardo replied, his voice choked with emotion. Our love has no limits, Valeria, and that's what really matters. They looked at each other, and at that moment, with the sun setting on the horizon and the sound of their daughter playing in the background, they knew they were living the best chapter of their lives. Life, with all its surprises and twists and turns, had finally brought them to this point. A point where true love had no more obstacles, where the family they had created was the foundation for everything they would build in the future. Eduardo and Valeria didn't need anything else. They had found in each other what they had always been looking for. And that was enough. After all, true love, like theirs, has no limits. It simply exists, in every gesture, in every look, in every day lived side by side. And so, with their family united and their hearts full of hope, they moved forward, ready for whatever the future had in store for them, knowing that, together, nothing could stop them. Did you like today's story video? So leave your like, subscribe to our channel, and activate the notification bell. 2 other stories will now appear here on the channel that will surprise you. I advise you to watch.